it's as much work as traditional film and TV, but it's quicker and the success rate is higher. But you're more likely to succeed at it, and the entire process, start to finish, can be a lot quicker. So I think it's really appealing.
Hello and welcome to Off the Lot. The film industry is changing fast, and if you want to make movies, it's time to become your own gatekeeper. If you've got a vision and the drive to make it happen, this podcast is for you.
We're your hosts, Ken Kabatov and Anthony Yap, and every week we dive into the hustle, challenges, and strategies of independent filmmaking. We talk to directors, producers, and industry pros about what it really takes to get your film made on your own terms.
Let's dive in.
All right, folks, welcome back to Off the Lot. My name is Anthony Yap, and there's a $9 billion industry happening on the phone in your pocket right now. And many filmmakers that I know either haven't heard of it or are dismissing it as something that might be beneath them or something that is not really the world that they want to get involved in. And what I'm talking about right now is vertical microdramas. And these are these 60 to 90 second episodic soap operas that you might be seeing on TikTok or Instagram. And these are quietly becoming one of the biggest production booms in North America. And one of the central hubs of that boom is actually in Vancouver. My guest today has cast nearly 60 of them and has literally written the book on vertical dramas. She co-founded an advocacy organization to professionalize the format, and in July of last year helped broker the first union-approved vertical series in Hollywood North history. Monika Dalman is a Vancouver casting director with credits on CBC, Disney, Marvel, and dozens of telefilm and CMF-backed indie projects. She's also the rare operator who saw an emerging format early, went all in, and built infrastructure around it, from a book to an alliance to a certification seal, while everyone else was still asking what the heck vertical microdramas were. I'd like to welcome Monika to the program. Welcome, Monika.
Thanks for having me, Anthony.
I hope I got that resume correct there. Is there anything I missed out on that?
Well, a little bit. So in 2025, it was a $7 billion industry. And in 2026, we're looking at about 14. And I've cast over 100.
Oh my gosh.
Of these vertical microdramas, since 2023.
Oh my goodness.
But you were close. You were really close.
I was right on that. It's like this is updated information. This tells you everything you need to know about the industry, is that the information you have now is already outdated by the time you get it.
Always. Yeah, exactly.
And so before we get into the vertical side of things, you have a background obviously in acting, but also in sort of what we'll call quote unquote traditional casting with CBC, Disney, Marvel, and Canadian sort of shows. What was the moment you sort of got into casting as a casting director?
Well, so I have no background in acting. I've never been an actor. I did one theater production in high school, and that is the extent of my acting experience. I've never been interested in acting itself as a career for me, but I'm interested in casting because I like actors. I enjoy being around actors. My children are both professional actors. And I'm a big supporter of the arts, and a lot of my background is in human resources and coordinating volunteers and sort of putting together teams of people that work well together. I have a lot of experience in recruiting. I guess I'm a connector of people, and I've always had an ability to know a person, meet a person, spend some time with a person and get an understanding of what their strengths are and what they're not that strong at, and what makes them an excellent fit for a team. And a lot of what casting is really putting together the right team. So adding into that, an interest in stories. And I can't think of a single person who doesn't watch TV, doesn't watch movies, doesn't consume media arts in any way. So, I love, meeting an actor, seeing their performance, getting to know them, and then seeing that there's a role that really aligns well for them. The producing work that I do is all the same. Also, it's really about connecting people to the right projects.
Right.
And I feel like not every person is right for every actor role or every crew role or every job, but I feel like every person can find their place on some project.
Right.
So finding that special place for a person is my favorite thing to do.
When we talk about casting for like movies or even just like web series or even verticals, I mean, I think casting is casting, whether you're casting for one format or another format. What's sort of your ideal producing partner in this case? Like, what are you looking for when you're aligning yourself with a production or with a producer as a casting director? And I know you've gotten into producing now as well, so it's not you're kind of seeing both sides of it. But what are you looking for before you make a decision to come on board?
A lot of it's a vibe check. Like if I feel like the person is realistic in what they're looking for, like when we talk about that triangle where being like good quality, affordable, enjoyable, like it can be really difficult to find a project where you've got the money, you've got the talent, you've got the skill. Sometimes it feels like, you've got to leave one of those things out. But if a producer comes to me and they have a great project and I can tell that they're a really good person to work with in that situation, if they don't have a ton of money, I'm usually, happy to come on board as long as, the compensation is fair and reasonable for what the total budget is. But if someone comes to me and they have a really super high budget project, but I can tell that they're going to be like really difficult to work with, and I'm going to have to constantly be like looking out for myself the entire time, looking out for the actors, feeling badly for how the crew is treated, then that's a no for me. We all have to pay our bills, but I feel like at the end of the day, we're not curing cancer, as they say. Like we're making entertainment. And so I feel like it shouldn't be dangerous or miserable to make something that's, meant for entertainment.
Right. And typically, like for yourself, when is the ideal time for you to come on board? Because I've said this from the beginning, it's like your best production value oftentimes comes from who you cast in your film. Honestly, most other things won't really matter if you don't cast properly, which makes it, for me, seem like a casting director should be on board almost like from the get-go, like the moment you've got a script that you're going to plan to shoot. But when do you typically get brought on board, or what point is it almost too late for you?
Well, I mean, it really depends. It depends on what kind of support a project requires. Like for feature films, I'm often brought on in the development phase because at that point, the project might not even be greenlit yet. And what people don't realize is that when we hear stories about feature films, getting out there and making millions of dollars and being a huge commercial success, but they don't have any like attachments to them, like famous attachments. That's really rare. Most projects that get greenlit and get to go ahead are getting greenlit based on the lead talent. So for features, a lot of when I get brought on is in that development phase when we're looking to attach somebody to the project who is considered bankable or marketable, someone who has value where distribution will see their name and say, all right, this is going to sell. But sometimes I'm brought on to a project like that and the team, we're all working together for sometimes years. Because if you're an actor who has actual bankable market value to the point where your participation in a project is getting it greenlit and getting millions of dollars thrown at the project, like you and your agent know who you are. They're going to need to see assurances from like they're probably pitched 10 projects a day, because like if you're an actor who brings financing to a project, it almost doesn't even matter what that project is. Like if you're Keanu Reeves, like whatever project you're in is going to sell.
Right.
So at the end of the day, like they're in a position where they have to mitigate risk. The agents and actors have to mitigate risk because their time is very valuable, right? And so they have a team of managers, agents, entertainment lawyers who then will look at the project and say, okay, who's already attached to this project? Like, what assurances do we have that it's going to go forward? Let's look at who the team is. Like, usually producer, DP, director, sometimes lately composer even looks really good. They're looking for people who have, this isn't their first rodeo. So it's really unlikely that if you're a producer and you want to make a project that has an attachment to it and you don't have the money up front to make the offer, like, you're going to have someone on your team who's already done it before, which is why relationships are really important. Because, if you're a producer and you're out there and you're like wanting to make connections, like, you want to make authentic connections with people so that they get to know you and they trust you and they want to work on your projects, right? But yeah, it takes years. It can take years for those projects to go to camera, if they go to camera at all. Even projects that are greenlit and have a financer, have, been pre-greenlit for distribution, some of those projects don't even get made because someone pulls out or the attached actor is impossible to nail down schedule wise. And it can be very discouraging. So that's one stage I might come in. But then a lot of projects that have already been greenlit, they already have those leads attached. Usually I come on board like 4 to 6 weeks before if I'm just casting, the supporting roles.
It's such a delicate balance. I think, like, I know, we've talked about this before about the idea of like starting to cast when you're in that development phase. You don't have the money yet. You have some thoughts that you might be getting the money, but you don't have the money. How do you get an actor interested in a project without that guarantee or without that assurance from the production team? Like, do you need to have that director or something else to make it seem, I guess, quote unquote, real?
Well, if you're not wealthy and you don't have the money to show up front, then what you need is somebody on your team who is directing it, who is producing it, who's attached as an EP, who has a name for themselves already made. And so people get very frustrated because they might have a really great idea, but they also might have told their friend is going to direct it, or their friend is going to be the DP, or their friend is going to be the EP or the producers. But if your friends don't have like receipts that they've already seen a project of this size or larger through, then, you're at a real disadvantage. Like, then you've got to hope you have somebody on your team who's a family member to like an actor who's bankable.
Right.
So yeah, like film is very like team oriented, and it's just like any other group that you work with in your life. Like, it's very rare that you'd automatically already love, already be super close to, already have a great like personal relationship with every member of your team, because the reality is being BFFs is not going to make the film happen.
Right.
You're very likely to have to work with somebody who might not be someone you'd invite over for your birthday party or have over for like tea or coffee at your home. But, some people, their work experience is what connects them to a project. And so, yeah, like if I always say like, okay, so not everyone can be new on this project for it to be appealing to an actor. You've got to leave some space for somebody who's established. Like we have to tangibly prove with measurable, objective evidence that it's likely this project will go through based on past experiences and past projects in order to get an actor interested. It is very, very, very rare that it would be just on the story. And an agent or manager's job is literally to keep you from getting that story to their actors. Because let's be honest, like actors want to act, actors love stories. The agent and manager are there to be an objective gatekeeper, to be like, hey, yeah, this might be a great story, but is it going to happen? Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it can be very tricky. And I think that it has never been more accessible to work in this industry than it is now, because, even 25, 30 years ago, if you wanted to be a director, if you wanted to be an actor, if you wanted to be any kind of filmmaker, you pretty much had to pick up your stuff, move to LA, go there and hope that, you run into somebody who is connected. The internet has changed everything. It's made it so that you can live anywhere in this world. And if you have access to LinkedIn, to YouTube, to social media, to Instagram, to anything online where you connect to other people, you're just a little bit more likely to be able to reach out to creatives that are in film. And so that's awesome because I don't want to just hear stories from men in LA. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So it's awesome. But at the same time, accessibility means it's accessible to everybody. So that means you're competing with more creatives than ever before. But, 25, 30 years ago, you couldn't probably even have competed with anybody. So
yeah, like a script and maybe a director who directed a couple of films was enough credibility to get your project maybe in front of an actor, because just to have directed one or two films was a feat in and of itself.
Yeah.
To have been funded enough to get that, even if it was, and just to have that completion. Whereas nowadays, like anybody can have directed a feature film or some kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And so there needs to be a little more juice behind that in order to grab the attention of someone who wants to work with you, because a lot of us are first time directors or newer directors in this business, and there's nothing wrong with that, it seems. But as you're saying, it sounds like that's where your ability to partner with the right people is actually almost one of the most important things you can learn right from the start.
Mm-hmm.
Because almost like you need an authority validator in a way that says, oh yeah, this project's worth it.
Yeah. And I mean, working as like a consultant for producers, if I'm hiring writers or if I'm hiring directors, I mean, if you go put a post on LinkedIn and say, hiring writers, hiring directors, and like your inbox is going to be full. But 99% of the people who reach out to you are going to just be shooting their shot. Even if you put very clearly, and I've done this before, so I know that it can be a gong show. Like if you say must have experience, you outline the experience, like you're going to get 50% of the people who reach out to you will have none of that experience, right? So, you have to really sift through it. And so it becomes very, very, very tricky. But yeah, I mean, when we have the stakeholders are what it really comes down to. And if you're getting a film financed, then the idea is that, people are going to see their money back. And just like any other financial investment, you're going to have to show them like that you've done risk mitigation in your decision making as a production to increasing the odds as best you can,
right?
That they'll, see a return on their investment. And they're not going to want to hear, oh, well, I work really well with this person on set as the reason why, they've been hired. They're going to want to see an example. This person worked on such and such a project that brought in 50 million or brought in 25 million. And then even at the end of the day, you could have a team. I don't want to name names of movies that have been just a disaster that have been like really well financed or funded. But like there have definitely been films that have come out in even just the past year where it looks on paper like all the boxes were checked, like, like multiple, like familiar actors, studio backed, everyone's IMDb is like loaded to the max with network shows and it still doesn't appeal to an audience. Like that can happen.
And a lot of that is there are sort of those tried and true, like, obviously like horror films tend to find audiences and certain types of genres tend to almost always have an audience. But even that is not a guarantee of success. So a lot of these you are taking flyers, which means there's a bit of a risk no matter what happens with any project. I mean, if it's badly made in the end, it doesn't matter who you had in it, it's still badly made. It might not, the word of mouth won't be there or the advertising won't be there or the fact that they thought they might throw it into a theater and now because they know it's not going to make it in a theater, they're now direct to streaming, its value has gone down.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting to talk about because all of this really boils down to like the things I like about verticals, truly, because there's something really nice when you're working in traditional film and TV and, you're dealing with this decision-making process and you're dealing with these timelines and these budgets that are incomprehensible to the average person, to be able to get a project from inception of the idea all the way to you're looking at it on the app in as little as 3 months, like that feels really good. And it feels really good to be able to cast actors that don't have to be famous, that aren't asking for more than half the film's entire budget as their pay. When you're on like a traditional film or TV set, you have PAs on that set that might be getting minimum wage. And let's say it's a 16-hour day. You might have a lead actor who's getting, $50,000 to be on set that day.
Right.
And to work on that same project, you've got your PA that might be like living in their van getting minimum wage. Like that's a huge pay disparity. But in verticals, like you're not hearing anyone write home about the super high wages. But I'll tell you right now, like the distance between the lowest paid person on that set and the highest paid person on that set is nothing compared to a traditional film or TV project.
Yeah, and talking about verticals, one of the interesting things, like I PM'd a couple of them last year, and you think to yourself, like they are feature length scripts, like they're 100, sometimes 90 to 110 page scripts broken into these 80 to 90 episode formats. And we were shooting them in 8 days, sometimes 7 days. I think some people were doing them in 7 days. And it's amazing the pacing that you go through just to make these things happen. And I can see why the model is working, because when you don't have to spend, 3-4 weeks making a feature length film, and you can do it in almost like a week and a half, it's appealing because it's cheaper. It's also the format you don't have to have the latest and most expensive gear to make it happen. And it seems like it's just a different model of filmmaking, but you're still making the same kind of projects, like the same kind of stories.
I liken it to, it's about the same requirement for crew and cast and gear and locations as a made-for-TV movie, but it's not set up like a feature film in acts. It's more serialized to unfold like a TV series. But I mean, your final product and your script length is really similar to like what you're dealing with in a made-for-TV movie, like in the Hallmark and Lifetime world. And truthfully, the people that are working on these sets as crew are all the people that you would normally see on a movie of the week set or even like a TV series here in Vancouver, because they just didn't have enough work in traditional film and TV. So they were going where they were needed, and it was vertical sets. And I think in a lot of ways, it still is vertical sets. We're seeing an increase in work to a certain degree, but we're not seeing enough to keep the lights on for people, for sure.
Right. Yeah. And if you really want to stay in this business, I mean, you've kind of got to go where the work is, and you have options to go to maybe commercials or other things like that. But ultimately, in the end, if you want to be in the narrative storytelling world, this is sort of maybe the easier barrier to entry, if you want to call it that. There are times where it picks up, where it's been so prolific. I remember last year, it was like there were, easily probably 5 to 6 shooting at any given point.
Well, last year in Vancouver, we had 20 to 25 shooting at any given point.
My gosh. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It was a lot. And that was all throughout 2025. I don't think we ever dipped below 20 at a given time. And we're still operating at pretty much that same rate right now. There's about 3,000 completed verticals being put out every month worldwide, but that includes like non-English language.
Right. What do you think the appeal of vertical dramas is for the audience? What's different about that than, say, traditional content, if you want to call it that?
Well, it's not the same at all. I would say verticals they're film industry adjacent, because we have human actors and human crew and they're a film set. But really, these are apps. Traditional film and TV is meant to be viewed with others. It's meant to be viewed on a bigger screen, even if it's just in your living room. You throw on a show, you're watching with your roommate, you're watching with your partner, you're watching with your friends. Um, the narrative style of a vertical is meant to be watched by yourself. Like, it's nothing that you would throw on a movie screen. I mean, we do have a couple events that have taken place for verticals to kind of like summits or conventions or like one-off events where people are celebrating that they've created one. But for the most part, this is content that's not designed to be viewed as a group. Um, and the more it is designed to be shared with more than one person watching it at once, the less profitable it is because it's just not that type of product. It's like if, you had a great idea for like I always use bubble tea as an example. Like, you don't go into a bubble tea shop enraged that they don't have caviar or sushi or like some high end food, right? Because you're not going to the bubble tea shop for that. You're going to it for something light, something sweet, something as a guilty pleasure. And if you were to propose that you would open a better bubble tea shop, but you just made all of your bubble tea like way more expensive, like your bubble tea shop would tank. It would not work out for you. So I think that it's really important to understand that while these are, similar and film adjacent, they're really not a replacement. I feel like we're just lucky that they're around because traditional film and TV is sorting itself out at the moment, and it just isn't providing the work that it used to provide. But like as far as this is all done very well because of the new consumer behavior of having a smartphone. 15, 20 years ago, like we didn't have phones where, you could use this much data or your batteries could last this long, or if the technology for the apps wasn't there. Right now we have this technology and we have, a new consumer behavior, which is scrolling on your phone. And so I think that it's really a response to this new consumer behavior, and that's why it's done so well. And I mean, reels, like I feel like a lot of people think, oh, they must be shooting verticals on their cell phone, like a reel or like content. But I mean, that's not how reels work. Like reels are like, I think what's the max reel length, like 4 minutes or something. And then it kind of moves on. Yeah. Like it was a minute for a while, then it was like 90 seconds. Maybe we're at 4 minutes. I'm not really sure. But when you're done watching a reel, it suggests a completely different like type of story to you possibly. And these are like, I don't know, just conveniently set up reels where it goes to the next episode automatically. So it's just a different consumer behavior.
What are the stories like for verticals? Like what makes for a good vertical story versus a traditional movie?
Vertical micro dramas, which are the ones that have been the biggest financial success, are really just like shorter, snappier versions of traditional soap opera, which has existed. I mean, before we even had film and TV, we had live plays. Shakespeare is effectively soap opera. We have cave drawings of like dramatic family and relationship problems being depicted on cave walls. So I feel like verticals didn't really create anything in terms of story design. Soap opera has always been in existence. And what's so fascinating is every culture has their own tropes within the soap opera world. Like Mexican telenovelas have their own particular flavor. And then there are tons of Indian soap operas, Colombian soap operas, Korean soap operas, Chinese soap operas, Japanese soap operas. Like every culture has this type of material. And I think why it serves the vertical format so well is just because there's not a slow burn. Like a lot can happen, and it can happen really quickly. And so far, what has made money and been successful is the, drama, soap opera style drama. But We are seeing a little bit of movement toward things like horror and sci-fi and true crime. The numbers aren't really out yet to determine like how successful those will be. But when I'm watching, like over Christmas break, we watched a movie on Netflix that was called, I think it was called My Secret Santa. And immediately I noticed all the hooks, all the cliffhangers that are, so famous in vertical, but we really do it in traditional film and TV writing too. Like if you don't have anything happening and there's no stakes and you're not emotionally invested in the characters of any story, it's going to tank, right? Everything just happens more condensed and more quickly in verticals. So like there's elements of vertical in everything. In traditional film and TV, we have slow burn. It drags out a bit longer. But in vertical, it's just really quick and delivered right to you.
Yeah, and what I remember from watching soap operas back in the day when I would maybe pay attention to them more is every scene always had that hook, right? Like you'd have two characters in a scene and you might not see them again for another 20 minutes or something like that, but they'd start the scene and then they'd end the scene with some kind of dramatic, like you're not getting a resolution here, you're getting something that's going to make you want to come back to that, or when that story comes back, you want to know how that resolves. And they could spend 2 episodes in the same room on a soap opera set, but each scene becomes like a hook to the next scene, but you're going to have to wait because there's going to be 3 or 4 scenes with other characters first before they come back to that. And it seems like you're getting the same thing here. And I mean, traditional television was always like that too, right? Where you had 5 or 6 acts in a TV episode, a 1-hour TV drama, and each act led to a commercial break.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you had to end on a hook in order to get people to come back after the commercial break. You had to give people a reason to come back every single time. This seems to just be doing it on a much hyper basis where it's maybe more every 2 to 3 minutes. You're giving people a hook to come back to after that.
Yeah. And I mean, we call them soap operas because they were on television to sell soap.
Right.
Like literally laundry soap, right? So, and then right now, if you're a filmmaker who works in TV movie land and you're dealing in Hallmark and Lifetime type movies, like we still have commercial breaks that you need to write for that you're on set and you've got to get this moment because this is going to be the commercial moment where we need people to not want to go get a drink or go to the bathroom. They need to sit and watch the commercial. So like really not a lot has changed. Like vertical is very, very similar to the stories in traditional film and TV. And I even think that the on-set behaviors and habits, good or bad, are really just turning a mirror on traditional film and TV, because a lot of the complaints that I hear from traditional film and TV, like filmmakers, are really just the same as like, who hasn't heard of like, a scene going sideways because there's no intimacy coordinator,
right?
Or, people being asked to work longer than they're supposed to. These are bad things. Like these are not good things, but I feel like with vertical, we romanticize traditional film and TV to be universally safe or just so much automatically better than a vertical set. And it's just not true.
Right.
I mean, at the end of the day, like I said earlier, the people on these sets are the same people working in traditional film and TV, very much for the most part. And if they're trying to get away with things that wouldn't fly on a typical film or TV set, then they're doing that because they feel like no one would hold them accountable, and the pace is really quick. And so I feel like it's easier to want to cut corners. But again, that's no different than what you see on a Hallmark or Lifetime set. Like it's the same idea. Like no one's doing pickups later. Like for feature films and for television series, like there will be pickup dates sometimes, they get things back and get it edited. They maybe have a test audience and they're like, hey, we got to throw this in. Let's, get the actors, get the crew together to do a day of like reshoots or pickups. With a made for TV movie, like you're never going to have a pickup day. Same with a vertical. Like it's it's like, we're going to have to make our day, or, you know,
Yeah.
we're screwed. We're going to get in big trouble because we got someone who gave us money to do this. So you just got to get it done. And I think that pressure definitely exists in vertical world, but it totally exists in TV movie world also. Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
So if that's the case, like we're looking at, the hallmarks for that matter, like Hallmark has its own accountability system, if you want to call it that. They're making specific types of shows for their specific audiences, but also they have a hierarchy of who they answer to. Who do the verticals typically answer to in terms of that level of standard, not just workplace standards, but also just content standards as well?
Well, it's all the platform. And I think that what a lot of people forget is that even if you're talking about Lifetime and Hallmark they do not make their own shows. You might have, say, a Crown Corporation Hallmark film. That's one of their flagship shows for a season, but they're still getting a service production company to make that show. So they go out and they might send, someone from LA to go sit in Video Village to, check the shots, to make sure everything wander around set, make sure that, the set deck is correct or people's costumes are correct. But I've never once had, on any of the sets that I've ever been on with my kids, ever had anyone from a network go around looking at safety or asking questions. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not their job. Like,
right.
They're hoping that the teams that they're hiring, the service production companies, they're being hired to do things safely and to do things correctly, right? And so the equivalent of that in the vertical world would be the platform. And what you have to remember is that a lot of people coming from the platform in the vertical world are coming from China, right? Like you can have a 22-hour day in China.
Right.
Like, so if you've been on set for 12 hours of a vertical set in Vancouver, and you're going to want to hope that your service production company is being responsible, because you're not going to hear, nothing is going to be flagged with an EP from China. That's a short day for them. Do you know what I mean? So
right.
It's not different than traditional TV where you're hiring a service production company.
Yeah.
You're hoping that they're following those rules. That's what you're hiring them to do. But yeah, the equivalent of the network in the vertical world would be the platform. And some platforms are better than others. And more in the past, year and a half, 2 years, a lot of these platforms have set up home bases in Canada and the US. And you're going to find that just by virtue of them being used to working in North America, they're going to be a little bit more aware of what's happening on set that's appropriate and what's not so appropriate.
So in that case, because we're in Canada here, we have, BC has its own labor laws. America has labor laws and Canada has labor laws and so on. But, oftentimes if you take just normal corporate sort of greed and stuff like that, they want to go to the place where they can maximize the amount of whatever you want to call it, output, and pay the least amount of money. What's making Canada, because obviously like BC, I think we have fairly strong labor laws. What makes us an appealing place to make these projects?
I guess the bad news here is that there's not a single film or TV production that doesn't want to maximize output for the least cost.
No,
true. But because that's literally how business works in capitalism. So
right,
kind of sucks for us. But that's why we do need things like unions, and we do need things like labor laws, because until vertical world, I would see some union rules and be like, why do we need this rule? Doesn't make any sense. This is common sense. You wouldn't do XYZ. And I think that those rules probably do exist because it's crap that people tried to pull on a film set before, right? And they're like, nope, we're done with this. This is not cool. And I think that in the vertical space, they feel sometimes like, oh, well, we're not a union project, so we can do whatever we want. And that's not true, because even if a project is non-union, we do have human rights laws, and we do have employment standards, and we have federal and provincial and state laws that, there's rules about how you can treat people and what you can ask them to do. But the difference is you don't have a built-in advocate of a union to enforce those rules. So if you're on any non-union product. Well, okay. If you're on even a union production, if you're not speaking up and advocating when you see that something is being done unethically, it, you have to speak up, or no one's ever going to find out.
Right.
But on a union set, you've got your number to the union. You can call them up, give them your concern. They'll come and they'll deal with it. On a non-union set, you're going to have to advocate for yourself, and you're going to have to advocate for each other. And that becomes very tricky when you look at, the situation that some of the crew members are in. So, for example, part of why labor standards can be really, really bad in places like the US, where if you might, let's say you have a factory and you have undocumented workers in that factory, you better hope that whoever's in charge of that factory is going to treat people really well. Because if they don't treat people well, you have very marginalized people who have a lot to lose if they reach out and they say, hey, XYZ is happening in this factory. So what I think was happening at the beginning of vertical, the rise of verticals in North America was you had a lot of sets. We had tons of work for union crew. All of a sudden we had no work. Then we have this new type of non-union project coming, and, people who were in their crew unions were doing this work. So they go to set, they try to hope nobody notices that they're a union member. If they are worried about being caught for being on that set, they're probably going to be way less likely to complain about having to do unpaid overtime, or any like little rules where it might feel like, hey, that rule was broken, but nobody died. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
They're going to want to get paid for that gig. They're going to keep their mouths shut. And it's really unfortunate that a lot of the people who were running these operations not only, were inexperienced, but some of them got to the point where they were deliberately exploiting this reality, right? Because there's a very big difference in not knowing what the rules are in a new area and, exploiting the fact that that your labor force is doing this job against their union agreement, and that if you do something nasty on the set, they're not likely to report you, because then they're going to get into trouble.
Right. Yeah, because it'll work both ways. They won't get any work again on this thing, but also they get in trouble with their union for having been there in the first place.
Yeah. And so I will say that, at least I can speak toward in Canada, the DGC has been amazing. They have written waivers for their members. They seem to really want to keep them working. We've chatted with IATSE, and I've heard from third parties that IATSE is interested in figuring out how to make this work for their members, but I haven't seen any, I have no tangible evidence that steps have been taken. We did have a good meeting with them several months ago, but to my knowledge, nothing has come of that. I think it needs to come largely from the members.
Right.
There's only so much people can, I think that self-advocacy is one of the biggest reasons why I stayed in this space. I'm very pro-union, and there's language that I used in endorsing unions prior to 2023 that I now regret, because, and we've all said this, I think, from time to time, when we say, hey, if it's non-union, they can do whatever they want, or if it's non-unions, you're not protected. But that's not true. Like we talked about earlier, like you do have other rights. But I think that we've really fostered this belief that projects are a free for all if they're not unionized. But the reality is you can self-advocate. You can advocate for your colleagues and your friends and your family. But the difference between a union and a non-union project is that on a non-union project, it is you who has to advocate, right? There's no one that you can call up and they're just going to do it for you.
I work a lot of non-union sets, and you still have to respect even just the turnaround. Like you have to give people a certain amount of time between leaving set and starting the next day. Like there is a law. There are protections. Each union has different protections on their own, but there is a law around that. There's a law around work hours per week and required, days off or paid overtime if you expand beyond that exist regardless of whether or not you're in a union or not. The union just usually gives you more standardized protections and sometimes hopefully better protections than what the law allows. But also, I think one of the things, and I applaud sort of your advocacy on this too, is that it actually helps when there are more companies doing them, because there becomes not just a competition for the projects, but a competition for the crews.
Yeah.
Like crews want to work on companies that treat them well. And I hear that whether that's in traditional filmmaking or not, it's just knowing this from working in the industry in verticals, but also in MOWs and stuff. It's like there are companies you really like working for, and there are companies that you avoid because they do push the envelope a little bit too far for comfort.
I think that transparency is really important when it comes to pay also, which I had a project that I was producing on the East Coast, and we were very open and clear about our pay rates. And they were higher rates than most verticals. We had a higher budget though. We had about $350 versus the average $175 or $200. But we were really transparent about what our rates were for that project. And I had so many producers locally that produce verticals be like, why are you posting those rates? You're not allowed to post those rates. And I'm like, I am allowed to post rates on my own project when I set the rates and when I'm the one posting them. And I had so many people complain about the rates being posted. And I was like, you know what? I am going to continue to post the rates because I want to hire people and I want them to know what they're going to get paid. And then I would get these speeches from people in DM or email saying, oh, but those rates are really high and you're just making it more expensive for everybody. And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm like, our budget is higher. I'm not going to post a job, make a job posting and not tell people what they're going to get paid because that's stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you ever spend your time applying to a job when you don't know what the pay rate is? That's absurd. I wouldn't want to waste somebody's time like that. But you'll notice that in the vertical world, the producers are very weird about the pay. I don't remember which projects you had PM'd on because it's been over 100 projects that I've done now in this space. But I know that the vast majority of those companies really did not want the crew to know what the actors were getting paid. And they didn't want, the crew members to know what other crew members were getting paid. So I don't know. That to me is a huge red flag.
That's also I think of that as an indie film problem too, where it's if you want to be transparent, you tell everybody, and then you basically, it also leaves less room for people to sit there and think that they can by being a squeaky wheel, get more money than what you're paying everybody else, because you say, look, everybody's getting paid this same amount, or this level of person, the seconds or the thirds or whatever, are getting paid this amount. And we're not going to pay more or less than that. You're coming in and this is what you're getting. We don't have to go through a big negotiation about what your rate's going to be, because you're going to get the same position in another department, because that's what we've set it at. Because I always found this as a producer too, is what I found frustrating was negotiating with people, and you realize you wind up giving more money to the person who complains more.
Yeah.
And I always felt bad because as a person who I'm like, look, I took a job, I took the rate they offered because they offered it, and it was fair to me. It seemed fair. But then to find out later that someone else made more than me because they just complained more can be frustrating.
Yeah. And you want to make sure everyone is, operating kind of from the same place. When companies reach out to hire me for casting, if I can tell, I always find out the budget of the project. And then if I know that they're probably not able to offer me the same amount of money that I would typically get, usually my first thing I say is, okay, I want a comparable wage to what other HODs on the same project might be getting paid, right?
Yeah.
I honestly believe that people I have said that to have never screwed me over. Maybe maybe there's been one or two that have slipped by, but not to my knowledge. And people I find are usually pretty honest when you approach them with that. And none of those companies have ever been weird about me asking what other HODs are getting. But I think this is really a classic problem. I think people are not good at negotiating for more. And I can definitely say this from my experience casting and in the acting world, that a lot of times the people who are pushing the hardest for more money are not even the people who, really deserve all that extra money. Like sometimes we'll reach out and be like, here's the offer. And they're just an easygoing, great person. And I know the budget. And they're like, yeah, sure, let's do it. And then you might have somebody who, they have hardly any experience at all. And maybe they were the third choice. Like maybe we've already offered it to two people that couldn't do it. And now we're, getting to option 3 here. And suddenly option 3 is like, I know what I have. And it's like, dude, you don't know because you're option 3 and there's 5 other people in line after you. Yeah, it's a bit of a game.
It always is with in the film industry, like you said before, it's a business, right? So you are looking for value where you can find it, but also you don't want to pay more than you have to in any place, but you also want to make sure people, I always say the film industry, the best film projects are the ones where not necessarily where I make the most money, but it's also where I feel like everybody was on the same team from the get-go. Like we were all making the same thing and we were all there for the right reasons, for the same reasons.
Yeah.
From cast to crew, like everybody felt that same way. Where do you see verticals going from here? Like what, from the changes you've seen over the last few years and into the future, what do you see the evolution of the vertical microdrama sort of becoming?
Well, I would say that for the past 2 years, most of my consulting clients have been people from the traditional film and TV like network world. So like right now, most of my like regular consulting clients or clients that I have on retainer are studios. And I think that really what it boils down to is what I mentioned earlier of that consumer behavior. And if you think of it as a business person, we had like people complain a lot about, maybe this is controversial, maybe this is too much of a hot take, but I'll let you choose. So like they talk about the death of theaters. Okay. And when theaters first came out, that was the only place you could watch a movie. Do you know what I'm saying? Like you couldn't watch that at your home. If you wanted to watch a movie, you watched it in a theater. Then, watching a movie in a theater took a bit of a hit, even just with like home video. And now what we have is, I don't think it's the death of theater, but I think it's the introduction of new consumer behaviors and options. Like I'll tell you right now, like it's great to watch a movie in a theater, but 90% of the movies that I saw in a theater, probably from when I was like a baby to when I was probably 17, 90% of those would have been just as good in my living room.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so I feel like what successful businesses have done, and by businesses, I mean studios and like film production companies, they are businesses, have done to continue evolving, is they've leaned into new technology and they've leaned into consumer behavior. So where this is going is now you have existing brands that have existing customers and they're going to want to retain their customer, retain their audience, but there is this new consumer behavior. And so the smart companies have been working for years or are working now to figure out how they take their existing brand into the vertical space to adapt their content to this new consumer behavior. Because if you're at home and you're watching, your Lifetime or your Hallmark movie, or you're watching Netflix in your living room, but then you leave your home, maybe, it's easier to watch a vertical in your home. So every time the consumer leaves your brand, you run the risk that they don't return.
Right.
And now we're in the place where, instead of just, sitting at home watching TV, going out and not watching anything while you're out, the old habit would be, go home, turn the TV back on. But now we have this new consumer behavior that is making it so that could be something that you forego. You might turn that TV off, hop on the bus, watch your vertical, your soap opera, whatever. And then when you get home, maybe you keep watching the rest of your vertical instead of turning the TV back on. And that's the loss of, some of that time they can advertise to you, or some of the time that, you're in their brand. So companies are pivoting not to change from traditional film or TV, but they're learning how to take their existing model and adapt it so that, let's say, people leave the house, and instead of leaving your brand and going to a new one, they maybe stay in an adapted version of your brand. So what this will look like will be very different. Every single client that I've had, every like studio or network or producer that I've spoken with has had, a different idea, a different plan, and all of them have their pros and all of them have their cons. But I don't think we're going to see like two exact adaptations. But I think what we're going to see is people just working within their existing audience and brand to just find a way to retain their audience and then continue building a steady increase in new customers. And this is very typical. Like if you refuse to adapt to technology and consumer behaviors as a company, your company will tank. I love Polaroid, and I'm not saying that they tanked, but I do like using them as a cautionary tale of like when digital cameras first came out and Polaroid decided they weren't going to get in on that game.
Mm-hmm.
Like they took a hit. And I think that, companies that ignore a new consumer behavior are going to take a hit. So, and then with, legacy studios and traditional like film and TV companies looking to adapt, this will create more work for people working in film and TV. But I think people do need to, you don't need to lower your standards, but I always kind of laugh when someone tells me that they've done a lot of commercial work, but they feel like they're too good for working in vertical. It's like, you literally were just selling shit to people. Can I say shit on your podcast? I don't know.
Oh yeah, 100%.
I've gone like a whole hour without swearing. I'm so impressed. But like they act like they're clutching their pearls, like what they were doing was so much more honorable in the commercial world. But really, like if you think of verticals as being a job, if you think of them as being pretty much commercial type work, then I think it's a little bit easier to palette them. Like when we're on movie of the week sets with my kids, like people aren't running around super enthusiastic to watch this, saying it's their favorite network. Like some people are like, oh, I love these. But some people are like, yeah, I would never watch this. Like, this is my job. This is what I do for a living. The budgets being what they are, someone told me today that they were offered $100 a day to direct a vertical. And I was like, no. I'm like, you need to say no to that. Like, that's a crappy deal.
Yeah.
And you've got to say no to that, because if you start saying yes to that, you're kind of a crappy team player. Like you're ruining it for everybody. But when someone is like, I'm getting $500 a day, I'm like, okay, that is not good pay. Do you know what I mean? But it's not like, you're getting paid a fraction of minimum wage to do it.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I don't know. I think
it seems like part of the success of the verticals is that there's a lot of them. So that's part of like what the platforms are doing too, is that they need to have many of these going. They can't afford to make a $5 million vertical and have that be, one a year on their platform. They have to make 50 of them per platform per year, because that's what's going to keep their platform customers happy. And so it's an economy of scale. Like the budget levels are lower because you need to make more of them. It's like, it's kind of a little more on the fast food side of things. It doesn't make it any less of a worthwhile format, because again, like you said, people are watching it and they're expecting to watch it pretty much on their phone. They're not paying $100 to go to a movie theater with 2 or 3 other people and get popcorn and all that other stuff. That's not the experience they're going for. They're going for the watching it on the bus, watching it when I come home, watching it before I go to bed, that kind of motif. That's the audience. And you need to have a lot of them. Otherwise, the audience is going to get bored or going to leave.
I would say that the $350,000 verticals that I've worked on, like it's a pretty easy budget to work within. I think especially because a lot of people who are making that are coming from the indie world. And so like they've stretched a budget before. So suddenly if you're given $350,000, and this is USD,
right, to
make this project work, like, everyone's pretty happy with what they're getting paid as long as you're keeping them well fed and, you're being nice on the set and like it's safe. But even at the 175 to 200, like you can make some pretty consistent work for people. And like I said, when it goes back to the talent, like I've had people who were leads in Hallmark and Lifetime movies reach out and say that they're really interested in getting into vertical. And these are people who are probably making $100,000 a show. They just haven't been working. Do you know what I mean? And I say, well, I mean, I can probably get you a lead in a vertical, but you're probably going to be making between 1,000 and 2,000 a day. You're not going to be getting more than that. And they're going to make you audition, because in the vertical world, like it really comes, like, I know as much as people insult the stories, like it comes down to the story. Like the story is everything. Like when you're pitching your company to work with a vertical platform, all they care about at the start is your story, and that you've got like a DP, director, and like a handful of key HODs that have actually, completed a project before. Like, but it all boils down to the story. And vertical platforms don't care if you're famous. They don't care what your credits are, unless you're famous within the vertical world, which, will have a bit of weight on the casting decision in the end, but you're still taping. Do you know what I mean? Like they want to see you tape. And I feel like in the indie film world, you don't know how much someone's going to ask to be in your project. Like you might want to get an attachment of an actor who's worked a lot, and they're going to probably want $100,000, right?
Yeah, they're going to want their rate, what their quote unquote rate is, because that's what they're expecting, even if it is an indie project.
Yeah, and they're thinking they can bring this to your project, even though the vast majority of actors don't bring any financing to your project. But I digress. And but like on a vertical project, like the budget kind of is what it is. You're kind of going to get paid what you're going to get paid. So if you want to take home some money from working on set for that, like 7 to 10 days, then you say yes. If it's not enough money for you, you walk and they move on to the next. Like I've never on over 100 projects ever had a situation where the producers were like, oh man, they walked. It would have been so much better with them.
Right.
Like if people are asking for too much, they move on and we go with the next person, and, we just make it work.
It's even Hallmark style, where what they want is reliability, and they want those regular cast members in the verticals are cast because, yes, they are doing a good job, but also they're reliable, like they're delivering. And that's basically what they're looking for. And same thing with DPs and directors. I'm sure they're getting, they're getting hired because they're reliable, not because they're Denis Villeneuve. I think that's my assumption.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that when you're looking at even Hallmark and Lifetime, like the number 1 and number 2 are pretty important on the call sheet in terms of like locking the final green light. But even on a vertical, like if someone tries to like gouge you, like we've had people be like, I get 3,000. And I'm like, yeah, you don't. No, you don't. Do you know what I mean? Like, like it's such a small community, and like we know what people are and aren't getting paid. So like the rates become so familiar when you're making these projects, and like filmmaking really is a team. And if your team is not experienced and your team is not pleasant to work with, it can be such a nightmare. I think another thing that's really problematic right now is that people don't realize that there are people who've directed 30 verticals. There are people who've directed 40 verticals. Like while some people are learning what verticals are today, they've been in North America since the start of 2023. So a lot of your colleagues, whether or not they will admit to it or whether they talk about it, have been slowly building like a pretty solid list of, past shows that they've worked on in this space. I mean, once you have experience and you're pleasant to work with in the vertical world, you will work nonstop. Companies like service production companies will be trying, I don't know, I've heard of them trying to get people on exclusivity contracts or, like trying to buy them out from other projects, things like that. Like, and then now people coming from the traditional film and TV world are like, hey, I want to do this. This is my huge rate and I will only work for this amount. And they're just not interested in hiring you. Like they need you to have vertical specific experience now.
We're getting kind of close to the end. Actually, we've gone way over time, but I do have one final question for you. How does someone become like a vertical director in this space? Like, how could someone break in?
I mean, I think you can kind of break in by just doing the same thing you do in the traditional film and TV world. Like, eventually, everyone else will be hired and they're going to have to take a chance on somebody who's kind of new. If you have experience in traditional film and TV, when you see postings, when people are looking to hire someone on one of these sets, just send over your info, and your first project, you're probably not going to get paid the highest rate. Yeah, I mean, when I think about it, it really is just the same as in the regular film and TV world. I think going in without an ego, going in without an attitude goes a long way too. A lot of people, they'll get that first gig working on a vertical, but then all they do is talk about I see this, I guess, on TV movie like sets too. Like, I'll be with my kids or whatever, and like the crew will be on the set and they have to tell you 50 million times that they work in television too. They don't just work in movie of the week. You know what I mean? Like, it's just the same.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Everybody wants to apologize for the job they're on right now by saying, oh, I usually work on much bigger things.
Yeah. So I think just not being that person, being pleasant to work with. Like, it's pretty similar to film and TV in that way. I think going in with the willingness to accept that as much as it's the same, it's also a little bit different.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Generally, I feel like the people who are easy to work with are easy to work with on every project. And the people who are difficult to work with are difficult to work with on every project. So
doesn't matter what the project is. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think all around, just, being a pleasant human being to work with, and you'll get in the door eventually, because the more projects we have, the more crew we're going to need.
Mm-hmm.
And there definitely will be many, many, many more projects in the months and years to come in this space.
For sure. This is sort of, I guess, looking back on this, having kind of carved your own space in this niche, it seems like you've become quite the authority in the vertical space, at least in North America, for sure. And so you're probably getting pitched all the time on projects and everything like that. What is something you wish that every producer with a project came to you understood before they walk in the door?
Probably the story structure. Like, I wrote a book on how to write these. I wrote a book on all the details. Like the book that I wrote is literally the foundation. You could open that book and never having heard of verticals, read it thoroughly, and you'd understand what a vertical is. And so the producers that we work with, they hire us as consultants. And I feel like when they don't first watch all of our talks or Google us, we've given away a lot of information in various panels, in workshops, like in like trade publications. And I feel like if they come to us and they want to spend that first hour learning what verticals are, like, if they want to waste their money, then that's fine. They can waste their money. But I feel like the producers we really want to work with are people who've kind of come to us after already doing their research. Mm-hmm. And they have already watched verticals. Like, you can download over 100 apps where they'll let you watch the first 10 episodes for free. That's the structure. And the clients that we end up working with long-term and having the most success are the ones who, before they even reached out to us, had already watched our talks, had maybe already read at least the sample that's free of the book, that they've downloaded the apps and they've watched some ungodly amount of the pre-paywall episodes, and they're good to go. Because if you come to us and you just want all that information again, A, it's very expensive to work with us hourly for that information that you could get for free, but B, we're just going to send you to that information anyway, because like, you wouldn't, move out of an Amish community and say, hey, I want to be a producer. I've never seen a TV show before, but I know I want to make one. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
What's the book called again?
I would have to look up the name of my book. I always go to Amazon
Yeah.
and I search my name.
Vertical Microdrama Pocket Guide.
Yeah. And then I have another one that is the Vertical Microdrama Actor, Mastering Performance for the 916 Screen. And then I have a book that is Writing Vertical Microdramas for Screenwriters and Filmmakers. And pretty much I wrote those because I had been asked so many times to go over it. And now I'm at the point where I'm like, hey, check out my link tree. It's me talking on the news and me talking, or a playback article, me talking in the Hollywood Reporter about all these questions you're asking. Have a look at all of this. And then if you want to dig deeper on your own, I've kind of written the books to outline all of it for you. And then if you still want to, work together as a consulting client, then I'm totally down with that too. But it's as much work as traditional film and TV, but it's quicker and the success rate is higher. So, yes, it is not going to be a lot easier than traditional film and TV, but you're more likely to succeed at it, and the entire process, start to finish, can be a lot quicker. So I think it's really appealing for those reasons.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Monika. We definitely went over all of this. I feel if anybody has any questions about vertical dramas, first of all, per Monika, go read the books and watch the interviews. And after all of that, if you still have questions, then how can they reach you?
They can reach out on LinkedIn. And I have an email address on my link tree. I have one for submissions and I have my regular email. Usually if you write me on LinkedIn, I say, oh, hey, send me an email anyway. But yeah, and I have Instagram. All of those methods are totally fine for a reach out. But truth be told, I'm likely to respond by saying, hey, can you email me? Because that's my easy way of not losing information is email.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again so much for your time, Monika. It's been a treat. I look forward to chatting with you more in the future.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, so that's it for this week's episode of Off the Lot. We want to hear from you. If there are any topics you want covered or any questions you'd like answered, please email us at podcast.offthelot@gmail.com.
You can also find us on Instagram and YouTube. Our handles are in the show notes. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. And share this with your friends. See you next week.